So as we kick off this first video for the Future Familiar YouTube channel, I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of have an open chat with you all around a defining moment last year for me as an artist and how I turned what initially felt like a huge setback into something that has allowed me to become more inspired, productive, and quite honestly more successful than I've ever been. If you are an artist or are interested in becoming one and have similarly felt discouraged by AI, I encourage you to stick around because I'll be sharing two ways that I was able to incorporate AI into what it was I was already doing without displacing my regular workflows and tools that I've been using for so long. As a quick background for those unfamiliar, I have worked the past 8 years as a creative director, and throughout that entire time and across many different projects, I've always felt myself sort of drawn to 3D pipelines. So in the interest of tugging on that thread, I enrolled in Think Tank Training Center's Environment Art for Games program, where I was incredibly lucky enough to be mentored and taught by art leads from major studios like Remedy, Blizzard, CD Projekt Red. However, just as I was entering my final term and paying that final invoice, which through Think Tank and CGMA was bringing my education to around $15,000, as you see in the title, I had two emails in my inbox. One was that final invoice that I needed to pay for Think Tank, and the other was a beta invite to Midjourney version 2, which had just entered open beta. Now, for those of you who were paying attention at the time, you know that the quality of images coming out of V2 blew anything out of the water we had seen from AI before. Now, it's nothing like what we see now, of course, but at the time, it was enough to kind of send shockwaves throughout the creative community, especially as someone who's worked 8 years as a creative director and had just sunk a ton of time and energy and $15,000 into game art education. I was both immediately fascinated by the possibilities of what this can do for digital art, but also equally terrified that all of this time that I have spent building up my skills and learning how pipelines work in game art over this past 18 months would be washed away before I even had a chance to use it. So what did I do? Well, after what felt like an appropriate amount of self-pity and wallowing and introspection, I came to a couple of conclusions, which for the sake of this video, I'm packaging into what I'm calling my two truths. And for those who stick around to the end, I'll be sharing sort of a fundamental mindset shift and strategy that I've been adopting to help make sure that I'm still relevant in this new world of AI that artists are finding ourselves in. So jumping straight into it, that first truth that I came to was, at least for me, what I love about art and creating hadn't changed. At the end of the day, that experience, whether it's a game or a film or just a single piece of art, will to a large degree be felt the same by that end audience, regardless of the artisanship behind the scenes that we put into it. Of course, this isn't true for everyone in the audience, and it isn't true for all creators, especially those on either side particularly interested in the process and artisanship of creating something. But for me, this is the case, and I think for a lot of people in the audience, this is also the case. Don't get me wrong, I love the process of creating or unlocking new skills and understanding in different tools and mediums and genres, but if I really dig into the why I first got into photography or filmmaking or digital art or now environment art, what I really love about it is being able to deliver that end experience, to be able to give somebody a feeling that they haven't felt before that they could share with friends or family. And if that's my truth, at some point we have to sort of let go of that process that we've been obsessed with and perfected for so long in order to move on to the new processes and new things that can help us deliver more of those experiences and moving forward to deliver more of those experiences faster, which brings me to my second truth. And that second truth is that AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not, and regardless of the inevitable advancements that will be and should be made regarding ethical model training, attribution, regulations, etc. Regardless of any of that, AI is here to stay. And in time, it will have a huge impact on the pipelines and processes that we all use as artists. Now, I do think there will be considerable pushback and resistance from many, and I do think to a large degree, a lot of the complaints lobbied at AI nowadays are completely fair. And as an artist who has already incorporated AI into my regular workflows, I've had a lot of discussions with other artists around, like I said, very fair critiques over its current implementation. And I think a through line that I've started to notice in our discussions can be summed up by a single word. And I think that word is yet. I do honestly feel that most of the critiques in the digital art space are completely valid, and I don't think AI is there yet. It's imperfect, right? And it's being used imperfectly, from ethical concerns to inhuman feeling creations, rough around the edge processes, to simply the lack of infrastructure to incorporate AI into what we're actually doing as artists day in and day out. However, and I strongly believe this to be true, for those artists waiting on the sideline to see if AI goes away with enough pushback, or if it's here to stay, which it is in my opinion, there likely won't be a single defining moment where a switch is flipped and everything is solved one way or the other. The adoption and changes will be gradual and will happen over time, but as compared to innovations in the past which led to eventual disruptions, with AI things are moving faster than they've ever have before. And as artists, in truth, this is threatening our livelihood, and I think it's natural and it makes sense that a lot of us are sort of feeling threatened. But if we want to survive and hopefully to thrive in this new wave that is coming, we have to act now. We can't wait on the sidelines to see what happens. So with these two truths in mind, I knew that if I wanted to continue down this path as an artist, which I do, I needed to make a couple practical changes today to make sure that I'm still relevant as a creator tomorrow. And like I mentioned before, I wanted to share with you in this video 2 very practical ways that I've begun incorporating AI as it is today without disrupting what it is that I already do. The first of these is that I am now learning art faster in a high reps, low stakes environment with the help of AI. And the second is that I'm creating better art in a high stakes, low reps environment, again, with the help of AI. Now, before we get to that long-term mindset and strategy, which I promised you at the end of the video, I first wanted to dig into what I actually mean by both of these things first. Again, the first one is to use AI to learn art faster. Learn art. Now, I know that's incredibly broad, but what I mean by that in this context is that I'm using AI and the environment it provides to learn and develop my own artistic style and tastes faster than I ever could before. You see, we all have the ability to develop our tastes in different ways and over time, both actively and passively. On the passive side, it's anything from watching movies to watching shows and checking out behind the scenes and scrolling Instagram, Pinterest, ArtStation. Or on the active side, it's whatever it is you do to create: painting, illustrating, modeling, texturing, lighting. However, what AI, and for the case of this video, Midjourney, has introduced to my tool set when it comes to developing my taste is that it's introduced that high reps, low stakes environment where you can create an order of magnitudes more renders or outputs. I actually don't like that word renders, which I'll get to in a bit, but for the sake of this argument, let's call them renders. So it's in this environment where you can create a huge volume of these renders and iterations without needing to fully commit to an idea or concept over a longer period of time. For example, something that would take a 2D artist maybe hours, or maybe a 3D artist days, or maybe weeks, can now, at least to a degree, roughly be tested in seconds or minutes. This time it takes for us to create is what I'm referring to as the stakes in this context, since time is the biggest constraint we all have in life, especially as artists, especially as new artists who maybe take a bit longer to get to where they want to go in execution, or maybe as a studio artist who only has those few hours to create when they get home after work, or maybe after the family goes to bed. We want to make sure that every hour we put into creating is spent the most efficient and effective way possible, so that if we can get a bit real here for a second, so that at the end of the time we have here on Earth, we've spent the most amount of time creating the things that we care about the most. Now, I hear what you're thinking. That's what that passive component is for. That's what consuming and gathering and digging through reference is for. Well, yes, but also no. Let me give you an example. Recently, I was at a live podcast show for one of my favorite D&D podcasts, The Adventure Zone, at Comic-Con in San Diego this summer. If you haven't heard of them and you're into D&D or storytelling or fantasy, check them out. Link in description. Highly recommended. But again, while I was at the live show, there was an audience question about how to get over writer's block as a new writer. And one of the panelists' responses was that one of the things he learned going from a new writer to an experienced storyteller was that as a new writer, you often feel like you can't even begin writing until you've figured out those high level components, whether it's the huge story beats or the exact themes you want to get across to your audience throughout the story. But over time, he realized that just writing anything, just writing any detail of the story sort of helps you figure out those higher level things later. It isn't until you actually just start that you're able to figure out where it is you want to take it. Now, I know that's a bit of a repurposed analogy in this case, but if you sit with it for a moment, I think it actually applies here too. It's really often, as especially new artists, it isn't until we start creating things and getting some reps in whatever it is that we're doing that we can actually learn where it is we want to take it and what things are enjoyable for us to create. To kind of build on this for a second, one thing I learned as an art student after building my first set of environments, taking them fully through the game art pipeline over many weeks and for a couple projects, a couple months, was that the environments I like creating don't necessarily match up one-to-one with the worlds I like playing, watching, or reading about. As you all know from my Instagram, sci-fi is what I like creating, but I also really like fantasy and medieval settings. I love playing The Witcher, watching Lord of the Rings, most recently playing Baldur's Gate, or bringing it much closer to home, one of my favorite series and books in a sci-fi setting is The Expanse, which you could argue is a much grittier and darker traditional sci-fi than what you see on my Instagram. You see, when it comes to creating, largely thanks to that high reps, low stakes environment, rather than spending weeks or months testing out different aesthetics and styles in 3D like I was doing in school, I'm now able to extremely quickly figure out whether a blend of a subgenre or a different aesthetic is something that feels satisfying to me to create. In the end, I realize there's just something I find personally satisfying about the soft, organic, but hard surface shapes, the creamy, comfortable color palettes, the well-worn, lived-in environments. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you know that for every post I do, I include a short story that I write that describes a little bit more about the environment and setting or characters that might be there. And it wasn't until maybe the 50th time I did this that I noticed a comment pointing out that they really appreciated the subtle optimism that I include in the stories. Now, I didn't even know I was doing this. It's just that over time, through so many different iterations, I kind of found my voice, and what I naturally gravitated towards was this subtle optimism. Now, just like I had mentioned before, that doesn't really match up with the stories that I like playing or reading, right? If you look at The Expanse or The Witcher, or maybe some of my bigger influences outside of that, like BioShock or maybe AOT, they don't really exude subtle optimism. So what I naturally gravitated towards creating over time didn't really match up with what I liked consuming or enjoying or playing. And it's only through those quick, high volume iterations that I was able to discover that. So now while I'm working on these larger environments like you see here on ArtStation that will take me weeks or maybe months, I'm able to spend more time creating things that I know will be more satisfying to me because I've done all of those reps in this low stakes environment thanks to Midjourney. This brings me to that second practical integration of AI into my workflow, which is to create better art in a high stakes, low reps environment. Remember when I mentioned a little bit ago that I don't like referring to Midjourney outputs as renders? And that's because I think as artists, it's really crucial that we adopt a mindset towards AI, at least as it is today, in that what we get out of AI aren't renders, it's reference. If I came away with one thing from my time as a game art student, it's that for the projects I worked on, the better and more interesting reference I was able to gather, the much better set up I was to be able to find success in that project and to be able to bring it to life into something that I could be proud of. I was constantly on the lookout for better reference, endlessly browsing ArtStation, Pinterest, Instagram, art of books, behind the scenes content, breakdowns of my favorite games, series, movies. But when Midjourney started picking up last year, I began testing it out on different aesthetics and styles that I wanted to later bring into 3D, but first wanted to nail down a reference. And as a reference tool, I immediately fell in love with it. Now, I know this sounds an awful lot like the role of a concept artist, and to a degree, that's true. But as a 3D artist, what this flow has introduced is the ability to be able to now gather reference not by keywords or titles or even just the description that an artist might put into ArtStation, but now I'm able to generate and search by mood and tone and feelings and emotions, where before I was limited to SEO and things that artists tag to their own artwork. And this can feel extremely limited versus this kind of stream of consciousness. I just type in what I'm feeling to Midjourney and I get a lot of things back that I can use as reference in different ways. Now, as renders, Midjourney and other gen art tools today are getting better all the time, but still there's always something something about what they generate that makes that image not work fully as a piece of concept art. It typically gets lighting reflections wrong, or distance details get a bit murky as they descend away from camera, and has a funny way of concentrating detail in odd places, something that a human artist is much better at. All of that aside, if we start thinking of these renders not as renders but as reference, and you start to look for different ingredients and just specific components inside of the images, you can quickly find redeeming qualities in most of the things you generate. I think a useful way to think about this is, as an artist, you've just been allowed to hire an intern or a junior artist, and now you're an art director, and you can give it mood, tone, and feelings to go explore and bring back to you. And maybe some of them are off, but a lot of them do have those qualities that you can then wrap into further iterations or maybe adjacent explorations, where then you can step back and provide maybe a looser brief, and it'll bring you back surprising things that you hadn't actually thought of in the first place. Though it's important to note that just like regular reference gathering processes, and anybody who's done this before knows that you can get stuck in sort of this endless loop and cycle of, oh, there's one more reference I need to find, or there's going to be this next tab that I open is going to be the thing that I need just to fill out those details that I'm still a bit unclear on. So I highly recommend, and I know this is difficult to do, but to set some sort of timer or limit on that generation process, because it can become extremely addicting. And now that it's quicker to do, you want to do more. And the more you do, the more discoveries you might think are around the corner. And maybe more importantly so, it's important to be just as dedicated to cataloging that reference. As you start generating that high volume of images, it's very easy to get lost in them, more easy than those hundreds of tabs you probably have in your browser right now. So it's really important to get into a system and a habit of cataloging those references that you do find. One of the most powerful things about AI and the ability to create more faster is that, well, we'll have more to choose from, more options to build into our references, to discover online as people share those generations. But the downside is kind of the same, in that we're going to have more to sift through, more to sort through. And with generative AI, we're going to need to find better ways to deal with those new masses and volumes of content that are very quickly going to be unlike anything we've ever felt before. Scrolling through Pinterest is now going to feel endless with all of this new content. Going forward, I'll of course continue to turn to those tools like Pinterest and ArtStation and Instagram for finding and discovering reference from other games or from other artists and bringing them into PureRef when I'm working on a very specific project. But I've also started looking for supplements to help me deal with these masses of content that I've started to iterate using Midjourney. I tried initially turning to Bridge to see if Adobe has brought it into the 21st century, but I still can't do it. The UI is still too clunky, and it feels too laborious to actually catalog things, and it feels like more work than worth of what I'm getting back from it. I did find this tool recently called Eagle, which I've just started testing these past couple weeks. It's a much cleaner UI than Bridge. It is unfortunately local only, so you'll want to have it in a folder of OneDrive or Dropbox if you're worried about backups, which you should be. It has a really interesting system and really easy way to add tags and catalog all of the content that you're creating. And the way I do it is that when I generate images or a set of images in Midjourney, if I develop a specific style that I like, I'll drop those images into Eagle and catalog them the same thing, since over time I tend to kind of discover and reuse some of the same prompts, and that way I'm able to kind of mirror that with when I'm digging for reference in older generations, and I don't want to just scroll endlessly through Discord. I'm able to find it over in Eagle much easier than I could before. Over time using this process, I've begun steadily building up kind of packs or collections of reference for sci-fi, for anything from subjects or locations at a high level to maybe more specifics of detail cues or shape language or textures or lighting or interesting balance or rhythm, mood, tone, color palettes, really anything. And because I've been dedicated to cataloging them, I'm able to very quickly go back to those packs or collections and find reference that I can bring into PureRef for a specific project. And I don't have to go back and dig through the endless Discord feed or the endless tabs in my browser. I can just search for the things that were in my mind when I was generating them, and it just immediately pulls them back up. I do drop those packs kind of semi-regularly on Patreon as our Instagram hits different milestones. So I dropped Sci-Fi Hallways and a Sci-Fi Kitchens pack, which I think are a bit atypical from what you would see maybe on ArtStation education normally. They are free. Like I have a free trial on Patreon, so you can just, if all you want is the pack, you can just download and grab them and cancel, and that's totally cool. I do drop them regularly, so keep an eye out on Instagram if you're interested in this type of thing. Okay, so I hope you found those two examples of how I've been integrating AI into my workflow helpful. I know and admit it's a bit of a soft integration, but I think that makes sense given where AI is at right now. I don't think it's time to start completely reworking our workflows. But if you've made it this far in the video, I do want to kind of start talking about that long-term mindset and strategy that I've tried to adopt as a working creative director and as a game art student to help me stay relevant in the future despite all of these changes that AI is bringing. If as artists and creators we want to have the staying power to thrive in this industry going forward, we have to adopt a long-term mentality when it comes to continued education and re-education. I remember back in my bachelor's and also my master's that I was always feeling like the curriculums and teachers couldn't quite keep up with the current knowledge out there in whatever field it was that we were studying. All of these sort of education systems just can't quite keep up with the rate of innovation as it is today in 2023. Like YouTube with practical guides dropping every day, or online programs like Think Tank, which are able to update their curriculums at a much quicker rate than formal institutions because of the systems in place around them. So if education itself is changing to keep up with the rate of innovation and new knowledge out there, I think it makes sense that we also need to adapt our mentalities. This constant need to adapt isn't only true in the education sector, it's also true for working professionals. If they've been around long enough, any artist or creator will tell you that the tools that they've been using throughout that time have constantly evolved and changed. I think the difference now is that with the introduction of AI, is that the rate of change of these tools is going to become much quicker. The intervals between switching from one to another are going to become much shorter. So if we want to continue to be relevant, we have to self-impose systems and practice that comes along with this always-on mentality, which is why, in addition to both of these practical integrations of AI into my workflow, I've set up a regular routine that holds me accountable to always be learning in two specific ways. The first was really simple and practical. I searched out and found as many outlets and resources that regularly update on AI tech and new innovations coming to the gaming industry. By creating this master list and formally booking myself every Friday a window to go through and check what the latest news is, I've been able to build an active habit around keeping my eye on the next thing rather than just waiting for it to pop up in my feed or hoping an algorithm will serve it to me, which has kept me always up to date on whatever the new alphas or betas are dropping so I can test them as early as possible. The second part is exactly that. It's setting up a system and habit to regularly test the latest tech coming out. For those of you unfamiliar, I launched my Instagram account 8 months ago with the intent of creating daily posts where I publicly share the renders or reference with you all with the goal of inspiring other sci-fi creators. But at the same time, to put myself in a rhythm and to hold myself accountable to a schedule to always be testing what it is I'm learning. As a quick aside, we were about to break 50,000 followers on that page, which I can't believe, and we may even have by the time this video drops, but I wanted to take a second and to thank everybody who has dropped by there and left a comment or followed. It's been incredibly inspirational and has really helped me ground this habit. And I hope that the references that I've shared there have helped inspire some of you in your own projects. But going back quickly to that list that I compiled and checked weekly, just like my Instagram is my outlet for my daily practice, this YouTube channel going forward is going to be my outlet to keep me honest to checking that list regularly. I'll be distilling down what I find every week or every 2 weeks, depending on kind of the news cycle, with you all here on this channel as kind of quick dives into new tech and my new tests and what it might mean, especially in gaming, but I think it'll probably apply across digital art and especially into film. For anyone who hears this and really wants to take it seriously going forward, one thing that I found helpful to keep myself from falling off after a week or two is to take active steps to make sure that I'm pushed all of these updates. So rather than just having that passive listen notion and checking it every week, like I mentioned, what I did is went to each of these sources, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I actively looked for whatever their CTA was, whether it was subscribing and ringing a bell like on YouTube or signing up for a newsletter that pops up in the headers. I actively took action on these CTA asks. So rather than kind of just relying on myself to go back to that list every week and holding true to that time slot, which frankly I didn't in the beginning, these upfront actions helped to ensure that I was being pushed the content that mattered to me the most rather than relying on the algorithms or chance months. And I've since found myself much better equipped and comfortable in knowing that I'm able to stay on top of everything that's coming and pushing our industry forward so that I can stay relevant, as we keep talking about, that I'll be the first one to be able to test these tools as they become available. So I know in general that was a lot, and it was a lot of talking, especially for my first YouTube video, and I have no idea how it's going to come across, but I haven't even referred to that title yet. And I think that it is worth asking, did I lose $15,000 to AI? And frankly, my conclusion is, yeah, kind of. Just like anyone who's invested a significant amount of time or money into learning anything as it becomes outdated, you do kind of lose that. Going forward, I do think that a lot of the processes that I trained in will be replaced thanks to AI. I think maybe some areas at different speeds and some roles at different speeds. But if we're being honest, this is no different than the way it's always been. There's always been new tools and new things to learn and new things for artists to have to grapple with if they want to stay relevant. And the difference is, in our new reality with AI, this will happen much faster than we've ever had to contend with. So as artists, we have to be ready for this. The bright side, for students who are still in school or industry professionals who've been around for a while, the foundational skills that you've honed over the years or that you're developing now, or that taste that is becoming your own, are still relevant going forward. And the why behind creative decisions is just as important as ever. If I had not attended Think Tank, or I didn't have a background for 8 years as a creative director, I would have a significantly weaker foundation to build on top of right now. With video game art and environment art, most specifically in my case, having a solid understanding as compared to someone who's just jumping in with AI, right? Having that solid understanding of the foundations like I learned at Think Tank much better positions me to understand how the pipelines that are actually used in the industry today might be affected by the AI tech coming. So when I'm doing my daily tests, I have a little bit better perspective on what this might mean and the impact it might have, so I can be one of the first ones to integrate it in an effective way. And with that, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you sticking around for so long on this first YouTube video, which I'm sure is a little bit rough around the edges, but if you're like me and want to stay up to date on what's coming for us, I will continue dropping new videos just like this, whether it's a little bit more practical of a guide or just kind of a high-level overview of a new tool and kind of my experience in testing it. Make sure you do take that action and you do subscribe, because I don't know if YouTube's going to recommend my next videos to you. So if you are interested, I'll see you in those next videos. And until then, for those of you who already want to jump in and start using AI today, I've actually released a second video which is much more practical and goes into 2 lesser known but incredibly effective ways for artists to start using Midjourney that I think 99% of people completely overlook. So if you're interested, check out that video, and any apps I mentioned, other tools I mentioned are linked below. And I don't really know how to end these, so yep, I guess I'll just see you in the next one.